Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to look at NetherRealm's recently released Mortal Kombat 11 and see how it compares to its predecessor, Mortal Kombat X. We'll start this comparison by breaking down the more general graphical elements like character models, animations, lighting, textures, and effects. But since gameplay plays such a critical role in these types of games, I also wanted to detail a few of the major changes that have been made to the game's mechanics, giving you a clear idea of what to expect if you decide to pick this game up. These comparisons today will be based entirely on the PlayStation 4 Pro console versions of both games. Alright, so to kick this comparison off, let's start with observing the changes that have been made to the character models. Each of the characters have been changed dramatically, both from the actual quality of the models to the style of the clothing being worn. Whereas the characters in Mortal Kombat X wore clothing inspired by the Middle Ages, Mortal Kombat 11's clothing design has a bit of a more Renaissance look to it. Scorpion now features some armored plating on his shoulders, arms, and shins, along with more color variety and deeper detail to the cloth itself. You can more clearly see the various stitches and folds in Scorpion's tunic now, but it appeared like a simple flat texture in MKX. Another interesting improvement here is the increased resolution and improved anti-aliasing methods used. When zoomed in, you can clearly see some significant jagged edges to the character models that simply aren't as noticeable in the latest game. This provides much sharper detail and improves the overall image quality a great deal, creating what looks like a photorealistic character as a result. The changes are even more obvious with Sub-Zero, whose puffy vest-looking tunic has been replaced with a slightly more modern-looking tunic. Other changes include more fine details along his arms, legs, and torso, and a different idle stance, though this could be due in part to the chosen variation. Johnny Cage is an even better example of the improvements that have been made thanks to his more human appearance. For story purposes, Johnny Cage in MK11 now is much older and features some grayed hair combed back. His sunglasses have also been changed slightly, and he's no longer showing off his signature chest tattoo, at least not with his default costume. While seemingly the same, there's some better shadowing effects and an increased level of detail in MK11 that helps make Johnny Cage appear far more realistic than he did in MKX. So I think it's pretty clear. Mortal Kombat 11's characters have received a huge bump in quality, with increased texture resolution, improved anti-aliasing methods, and an increased level of detail. Now, let's look at how the environments have changed. Unfortunately, none of the environments appear to be shared between these two games, but we can still get a rough idea of how much has been improved regardless. Both games feature very dynamic backgrounds, with all sorts of activity happening in the distance, like crowds cheering or people just going about their business as if the fights aren't happening. But just like the character models, the backgrounds in MK11 appear much more crisp and more realistic as a result. Stages now feature more dense backdrops, and a ton of detail and significantly increased draw distance. MKX still looks decent, especially stages that feature special effects like snow particles or rain, but things like random civilians walking in the background look almost like a cartoon when compared to MK11. I think this stage alone says it all, with an insane number of moving objects like leaves and tree limbs blowing in the wind, along with impressive high-resolution ground textures and beautiful lighting effects. The lighting is probably responsible for most of the improved appearance of MK11. The smart use of bloom on characters with more reflective clothing and the smart placement of god rays in certain environments helps to create a more believable experience that always felt disconnected in MKX. Of course, this didn't feel like the case back when MKX first came out, but it's really hard to go back now considering how natural everything appears in the new game. NetherRealm also appears to have adjusted their art direction slightly, allowing for more varied colors as opposed to the more drab and dull appearance of MKX. This results in a much more aesthetically pleasing image, and one that really helps to bring out the deep reds of the game's blood effects. Shadows are a bit harder to compare though, as the environments feature different angles for the sunlight and different props can cast different shadows. But from the few slightly similar scenes I could find, it appears the shadowing in MK11 has a slightly softer touch to it, again making the image appear more natural. Next up, we have effects. Mortal Kombat games have always featured a number of different particle-based effects, from fireballs, explosions, and smoke to water and blood simulation. Mortal Kombat 11 seems to make some noticeable improvements, especially to the environmental water simulation. Water in this scene, or rather blood, looks incredible as it splashes against the rocks and flows down the other side. There's some decent water simulation happening in MKX also, but there's never really an example of the water flowing like this. I also noticed an interesting return of an effect from the PS2 days with one of Kotal Khan's grapple attacks. In the older PS2 games, blood would drip down characters somewhat realistically, with a stream of these red-looking bubbles that rolled down the character model. This is clearly present again with Khan's move, and it's possible it may appear in other places as well. One interesting omission here is the fire effect from Scorpion's teleport attack, a move that previously had featured fire for over a decade. It's possible this effect appears with a different variation, but I haven't found that to be the case yet. My guess is that this wasn't done for technical reasons, but rather to go back to the original style from the classic arcade days, where this move didn't generate any type of fire. Environmental-based fire has also seen some improvements, appearing more clear rather than being drowned out in unnecessary bloom effects. And now, we've arrived at the gameplay portion of this comparison. So, starting off, let's talk about the available features in both games. MK11 seems to feature most of the same modes that were available in MKX, including single fights, the story campaign, towers, online, and the crypt. But some of the smaller things like Test Your Might towers or the Faction Wars metagame do not appear in Mortal Kombat 11. Mortal Kombat 11's story seems to follow a similar design to MKX's story campaign, with specific fighters being chosen in a designated order bookmarked by cutscenes to help progress the plot. However, one nice change is the removal of the pointless QuickTime events that were part of the campaign's cutscenes. As for the story itself, I'll go into more detail about this when I release my full review later. The crypt has received quite a bit of an overhaul. Rather than the awkward, stiff, first-person mode featured in MKX, Mortal Kombat 11 features an explorable Shang Tsung Island with a third-person camera. This, I think, is a much better design, as it allows players to properly explore the location from the very beginning of the franchise. Though, at the end of the day, this crypt thing is the same as it's always been, and you'll just be running around opening boxes and getting loot like concept art or costumes. Speaking of costumes, Mortal Kombat 11 features a large amount of customization for each of the game's fighters. You can either select from a few preset variations with default abilities, cosmetics, and styles, or you can create your very own loadout, and can choose from any of the unlocked cosmetics for that character to match your preference. You don't necessarily have a lot of control here, as you can only really change small things like your mask or your weapons, but it's still a nice touch either way. Next up, let's take a look at the rosters in both games. Keep in mind that this is Mortal Kombat XL, a re-release version of the game that featured several additional characters that were not available at launch. So for the sake of keeping this fair, we're only going to look at the default characters for both games. Both games feature the more iconic Mortal Kombat characters including Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Jackson Briggs, Raiden, Kano, Kung Lao, and Liu Kang. But Mortal Kombat X also introduced a few brand new characters, including Aaron Black, Kotal Khan, Devora, Cassie Cage, and Jacqueline Briggs. Mortal Kombat 11 features all of the same characters, but does not see the return of Kung Jin, Takashi Takeda, Ermac, Goro, Melina, Farah and Tor, Reptile, Kenshi, Predator, or Quan Chi. In their place, MK11 sees the return of fan favorites like Baraka, Cabal, Scarlet, Frost, Shao Kahn through a pre-order bonus, Noob Saibot, and Jade, in addition to 4 new characters, Garrus, Centurion, Chronica, and the Collector. NetherRealm Studio have confirmed that new characters will be released with DLC, so it's likely missing characters like Reptile, Kung Jin, Kenshi, and more will be added as well. Still, at release, Mortal Kombat 11 features 25 characters, plus Shang Tsung, who is set to be the first DLC character, which is up from the 24-some characters that came with Mortal Kombat X when it first released. Now, for the fighting itself. Mortal Kombat 11 features a pretty large overhaul to the game's fighting mechanics. While the standard punching, kicking, jumping, and uppercuts remain exactly the same as MKX, their combos require much more precise timing in order to properly link together. Just spamming buttons likely won't help you this time around, so it's important to use the game's many training options to learn some useful lines. Rather than the X-ray bar that was introduced in Mortal Kombat 2011, Mortal Kombat 11 uses 2 bars, one for defensive moves like using the environment to jump away, and one for offensive modifiers, allowing you to improve your special attacks. Unlike MKX where you simply had to hold the block button when performing special attacks to enhance them, Mortal Kombat 11 requires you to follow up a special attack with R1 to enhance the move. This requires much more precise timing, raising the learning curve slightly. The popular X-ray attacks have also been changed. Players no longer can activate X-rays by filling an X-ray bar, but are instead given a fatal blow option if their health reaches a critical level. This fatal blow attack appears far more visceral than the X-ray attacks did, and can only be used once per round, making it far less common. However, brutal blows have also been added to the mix, allowing players to end smooth combos with a powerful final hit. The changes that were made in Mortal Kombat 11 appear to have been done to improve the flow of the gameplay experience, reducing the amount of time players are stuck watching the same X-ray cutscene, and requiring players to more carefully plan their attacks with known combos and special moves, rather than just running around mashing buttons. Other minor changes include the removal of the sprint button, and some slower overall game speed. The game's famous fatalities are also still here, and have become far more brutal and gruesome than ever before, but you'll just have to discover that for yourself. Finally, let's listen to a few sound comparisons. Which game do you think has the better overall sound design?
Round 1. Fight! Round 1. Fight! Round 2. Fight! Final round. Fight!
And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, Mortal Kombat 11 has shown a considerable improvement in its visual presentation. Everything from the character models, the environments, the lighting, and the special effects have been greatly improved. The game's roster has also seen some changes, with a few new characters, a few old returning characters, and a few odd omissions. And the gameplay has seen a complete overhaul, with reworked enhanced bars in the corner of the screen, and a major change to how the X-ray recovery attack functions. Overall, I'd say Mortal Kombat 11 is a huge step forward, but what do you guys think? Do you like the direction of Mortal Kombat 11, or did you prefer the visuals or gameplay design of Mortal Kombat X? Let me know in the comment section. And if you'd like to learn more about Mortal Kombat, check out the documentary I made that covers the full history of the franchise from start to finish. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.